Thank you for coming this morning. Welcome to our new adult education class. My name is Yudai Chiba. I'll be guiding discussion throughout the next 5 weeks or so. And I am currently the summer intern here at TUC. So I'm here for a brief period of time, but it's very nice to meet all of you. Since there aren't very many of us, could you remind me of your names? So there's some of you I haven't met yet either. So obviously, I'm Yudai. Let's start here with Achiko-san. Yeah. Nice to meet you, Achiko, and Pastor Lydia, which everyone knows. Hisashi-san. Yeah, right. Okay. Yasu, right? And oh, okay. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Remind one more time your name. Amy. Okay, Amy. Okay, nice to meet you, Amy. And Timo. Okay, nice to meet you, Timo. All right. Maybe I'm sure a lot of you have been here at TUC longer than I have. So basically the format to the topic. I hope you know the topic of this next 5 weeks is the Bible in Japanese culture, and I specifically gave it a subtitle of Meiji Beginnings, because something that I'm really interested in and I would like to think about with all of you is, where does the Bible start to come into Japan? Or when does it start to come in? And how does it take on its own life here in Japan? I'll get a little bit more into what I mean by that in a second. So I have to ask you a question first, okay? So where do you see Christian symbols and images in Japanese culture today? I just want you to think about this for a second. Okay? Think about in daily life or throughout the calendar year, where do you see Christian symbolism? It's just anything that reminds you more of Christianity or of the Bible or something. Let's get a few takes on this. Amy, did you think? What is thinking? Yeah.
You see after
Yeah.
sometimes no Christian, they wear a cross,
Right. Yeah.
or sometimes on the back, or even shirt or something like that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Sometimes they are not Christian, but they think cross is
Right.
cool.
Yeah. Crosses are quite fashionable. Hello. Okay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Crosses. And what is your name?
Claire.
Of course I know you, but yeah, okay. Hi, Claire. Okay. We're just talking about this question first right now. Okay. So Amy, that's a great point. Yeah, there's a lot of crosses in fashion, right? What else? Christmas, okay. There is a pretty big celebration, I would say, of Christmas in Japan, right? So I didn't grow up in a Christian family, but I grew up with Japanese parents. And every time I would come back to Japan in the winter, I would see Christmas lights, and I thought that was a normal thing. But then I went to a Christian high school, and then I had all these Catholic friends who were like, "Oh, but if you're not Christian, why do you celebrate Christmas?" I never thought about that before. So it's that sort of atarimae. It's like part of the atmosphere of being in Japan, right? Anything else? Weddings, yeah. There's one going on right now. I don't know if you saw people when you were coming here. Yeah. There are definitely wedding guests coming to the wedding venue next door. Yeah.
There's a lot of artist performances in churches. Like the Karizawa Church is very famous for the lightning,
okay.
candles, and some music.
Yeah.
I was looking for some concerts. Another concert in Shinagawa, there in a church. It seems to be an event location also.
Oh yeah, so churches as event locations, especially like for the arts, or right? Yeah, that's interesting, right? That a church is like a nice venue. Now, this is true even in the United States too. The United States also, large, nice church buildings can be event venues. But maybe there's something special about churches in Japan. Maybe there's like a distinctive atmosphere associated with it, right? Okay. Yeah, so there's some great, Hisashi-san, yeah. Pipe organs, yeah. Pipe organs are. Where do you see pipe organs?
Pipe organs can be found in many major concert halls.
Right, concert halls. universities, or yeah, a lot of university chapels, obviously churches, but yeah.
Even in some Buddhist temples.
Oh, yeah, I've seen this once. Yeah. That's right. That's right. Which is, oh, you really interesting. Yeah, yeah. That's a very interesting phenomenon. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So there are pipe organs everywhere too, right? So those are some of the main things that I think of too. So some of the examples, right? This is very hard to see. I'm sorry, but the lady on the left here, she has a very large cross necklace, and it's not only just a cross; it's Jesus on the cross. So it's the Catholic version. Yeah. So this, this is fashion from like maybe 10 years ago. So maybe it's a little outdated. I have no idea. But then this venue should look familiar to most of you. It's right there. Yes. I wasn't present when there was a wedding going on, so I just got a picture from online, but you know where this is. And then there's Christmas, right? And like there isn't like, so nothing in this picture is like really traditional. Well, I should say nothing, but like you don't see like crosses or anything in KFC. But like when you think about like the lighting, like the candlelight aesthetic, the colors of red and green, these are all kind of traditional symbols associated with Christmas, right? Okay, like the green is kind of like a symbol of life, red is like the blood of Christ. You know, like there's like a lot of like associations that are just sort of carried over as part of this package called Christmas, right? Yeah.
How many references to chicken do we have in the
Bible, not many that I know of. Fried chicken, definitely not. But I don't know, I could be wrong, but I don't think there are any. Chicken, yeah. Yeah, chicken in the bowl, yeah? Yeah, there's definitely there's definitely a lot of like eating birds, like edible birds, right? Like even when you think about Israel going through the wilderness, there are all these pigeons that the people complain that they don't have meat, so God sends pigeons. I don't know if pigeons are the best meat. I've never had pigeons, so I don't know. Okay, but one other place that I see a lot of Christian imagery is anime and manga. So like popular culture, okay? Okay, so some of these might look familiar to you. I don't know if this is familiar to you. It's called Saint Oni-san, right? Yeah, it's kind of a comedy series about Buddha and Jesus going on vacation, and so they rent an apartment together in Tokyo. But it's which is like a really odd premise. It sounds blasphemous, but it's actually well researched, so it's been quite popular. This one, I'm not super familiar with this one. It's called The Seven Deadly Sins, right? Which is also another sort of appropriation of traditional Christian imagery. This particular, I don't know if it's like a movie. No, this is another series or something. It's called Mokushiroku no Yonkishi, so the Four Horsemen of the Revelation, right? If that sounds familiar to you, right? Sort of an apocalyptic imagery that has been appropriated to the title. Now, this movie, many of you have probably seen. It's called Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Now, there's nothing explicitly, I should say, there's no explicit Christian or biblical reference in it. But do you remember, does everybody know Nausicaa's story? The story of Nausicaa? Okay. Do you know, Claire?
I haven't seen it in a while.
Yeah. But Nausicaa is a messianic figure, okay? So she's a savior of the world. But there are a lot of figures like that in, I think, popular culture. The difference with Nausicaa, though, is that she's a prophesied savior. Okay? There's an ancient prophecy that someone like her will come to bring balance to the world again. And she fulfills that prophecy. So that's a very, I think, clear messianic pattern that's modeled on Jesus. Okay? Which is why I also know this. There are a million of these that I could raise, but we don't have to go into all of them. So what I want to think with all of you today is that, so we can make a few observations about how Christian imagery or references pop up in Japanese culture. We can say that it's related to Japan's westernization, right? The wedding is a very good example of this, like celebrating Christmas. There are these concepts imported from the West that seem nice, like just broadly speaking, they're kind of nice, okay? What's that about? Some are just kind of used for marketing, right? KFC, very good example of how Christian imagery or Christian themes are used in marketing because, again, something seems nice about it. It's features in subculture a lot, whether it's subculture fashion or whether it's like anime. And then obviously, Christian imagery is associated with religion, right? I mean, this is needless to say. But I mean, if you probably ask your Japanese friends, your friends in Japan, it's like, oh yeah, they have some image of what Christianity feels like as a religion, right? But there's also other stuff that maybe you can think of, right? Maybe some association with romance because of the wedding thing. There's maybe the Nausicaa is maybe an example of like a storytelling trope about like prophecy and fulfillment or a messianic figure, something like that, right? Anything else, right? There are all these other ways that maybe we can think about how Christian imagery pops up in Japanese culture. So this is what I want to think about with you all for the next 5 weeks. So just keep these questions in mind. And what I want to maybe start with, what I would like to explore with you all is to sort of this idea that this didn't start yesterday, right? All this Christian imagery popping up in various places, seemingly random places in Japanese culture, this didn't start just recently. This is an ongoing phenomenon, and we want to get to maybe the root of it. And that's why I want to introduce to you specific examples from the Meiji period, Japan's first period of modernization that starts in the mid-19th century. Now, that being said, today we're actually going to go even further back. Today's sort of the episode 0 of this series. We're going to talk about, we're going to think about what some of the oldest, I should clarify. I'm interested in Christianity in Japan in general, but I'm specifically interested in the Bible in Japan, okay? So this is kind of the focus that we're gonna have today is the Bible, okay? And when you ask the question, when does Christianity come to Japan and when does the Bible come to Japan? The answer is more or less around the same time. So I want to maybe introduce to you the oldest Bible references in Japan today. Now, you sort of see more or less what I think the answer is here, but do you have a guess as to when the oldest extant references to the Bible are in Japan? Like when they are from or what they might be from? This is not like a curveball question. It's yeah, but I'm just yeah. Yeah, so it's in one of the Jesuits, right? Francis Xavier, right? Has famously brought Christianity to Japan in the 1500s. Now, we don't have a very clear indicator of the Bible from him. Now we know that even though they were Catholic, like we know they probably had some sort of Bible, right? Probably a Latin Bible because that was normative back then. But it's really hard to find a sign of it left today. Now, and there are bits and pieces of like Bible verses scattered throughout extant literature from that period and letters and things. But there's one block of Bible text that I can find that at least claims to be from the Bible, and that's this one. Okay. Now, the Jesuits printed a lot of books when they were in Japan before the persecutions started. This is called Santos no Gosagyo. I don't know if you can read. This is Japanese transliterated into Latin letters. Okay, so this isn't Portuguese or anything. If you can actually read this, Santos no Gosagyo no Uchi Nukigaki is what it says in the title. So it's excerpts from the deeds of the saints. Okay, so that doesn't sound like a Bible at all. It's not a full Bible, but it's what we call a hagiography. It's a collection of stories about saints, right? Because that's really important in the Catholic tradition. Saints mediate, right, our prayers in the Catholic tradition. but there's one saint in here who randomly is from the Bible. And you probably will not guess who it is because it's not very intuitive. It is Joseph the Patriarch, okay, from Genesis. And the reason we know this is not just sort of a story about Joseph, but basically a translation of the Joseph story from the Bible is that it claims so at the very end. At the very end of the story, there's a little note that says, this history is translated from the authentic text of Genesis. Though it's not a word-for-word translation, most certainly not, it has been copied faithfully without altering its sense in the least. This is a rhetoric that's actually quite common in Japanese texts because a lot of people were copying books, right, before print culture really became popularized. And so there is a rhetoric of girio takaezu. We have not changed the sense of the book at all, which is kind of the copyist way of saying, you better believe this is the real thing, right? They did this a lot with like Buddhist texts. And so and just to give you a taste of what this is like. Now, key idea here is that it's not a word-for-word translation. But if you take a look at the text, right, it doesn't actually start with the Joseph story. It starts with a genealogy from Genesis 11, chapter 11. You know when it talks about like, oh, so-and-so had this child, they had this child, they had this child. That's copied in, which makes me think they're probably not lying, right? That they're probably actually copying some kind of Bible text. But they do change some of the text. Okay? I'll give you a taste of how they change it. This is a very quirky text in general. Okay? And part of what's quirky about it is that you see all these unfamiliar names, right? Obviously, these are Hebraic names, Hebrew names, like Joseph, and you see all these unfamiliar ranks, like Pharaoh, right? That have to be somehow brought into Japanese. And so there are also these very unfamiliar place names like Gilead and Egypt. And so the Japanese text makes sure that they assume that the reader doesn't know. So it's like a place called Gilead, a place called Egypt, right? They don't assume that you know where that is, right? And so in that sense, the translators have been quite mindful of their audience. Also, when they talk about Pharaoh, what's a quirk of the Japanese language when you think about rank and status? Yeah, so what is san? What's sort of the general? Yeah, san is an indicator of this characteristic. What is this characteristic of Japanese that you don't really see in that's not as strong in Western languages? It's the politeness, right? There's a polite language. There's also keigo, right? There's, depending on the rank of the person that's speaking and the rank of the person that you're speaking to relative to you change the words that you use, right? And so when someone is speaking to Pharaoh, what's the appropriate way to speak to Pharaoh? Is a really interesting translation question. So the way that they deal with it, they treat Pharaoh kind of like the emperor in Japan. So they use little terms that would usually only be used for the emperor to the Pharaoh. So it's like they're trying to make sense of who this guy is, which is very interesting. Now, but I'll show you one really obvious quirk of translation here. Okay, when Joseph, do you all know the Joseph story? At least in outline. Okay, so Joseph is in Egypt. He becomes big and famous, right? He saves the country from famine. And then Jacob has a chance to reunite with Joseph. And this is from the scene where they reunite. This is very brief, actually, in the Bible. Jacob literally just says to Joseph, I can die now, having seen for myself that you are still alive. That's all he says. Yeah. Okay? I'll show you what this Japanese Jesuit version says. It's much longer. And it says, after that, Jacob said, in the present, there is no hope in a world of sorrow. As you, your majesty, are reposed thus, the joy of your aging father is such that even heaven is shallow in comparison. Oh, that the life of dew may fade with this happiness unspoiled. This is indeed the delight of old age. It's much more flowery, right? This is a very interesting choice to me, okay? What do you make of this, right? So just something to mull on because there are there are too many expansions like this in this text, but there are a few of them. And so this one was a very interesting choice. Maybe the copyist thought this was just a moment, where an old man reuniting with his son would there's more that needs to be said here. Maybe that's what the translator thought. I don't know, but this is a form of localization that we see. So this just to make the point is that this kind of adaptation of biblical material to Japan started quite much earlier than we typically think. It starts in the 17th century, the early 17th century, this is from 1591, so even earlier, from the late 16th century. And it's been ongoing since then. Now, the main thing we're going to talk about today is what happens after that, okay? So I have to actually kind of share some of my notes with you. But now, for those of you who've been in Japan for a while, are familiar with Japanese Christian history, probably know about what happens to the Catholics, right, after a certain point in time, right? Japan is unified. The Catholics come during a period of civil strife, I guess you could say, of a lot of fighting and disunity, which actually works in some ways in the Jesuits' favor, because it means that there are like smaller groups of people who can become interested in them. But then it becomes united under Toyotomi Hideyoshi, right? This one warlord in 1587. And so, well, I'm sorry, not in 1587, it was before that. But Toyotomi Hideyoshi, one move that he makes is to kick out all of the missionaries in 1587, which culminates a few years later in the first mass martyrdom of Christians, called the Martyrdom of the 26 Christians, in 1596. And there's a bit of recovery after Hideyoshi dies. Then the new polity that comes into power is called the Tokugawa shogunate. The Tokugawa passed a series of laws that outlaws Christianity in the 1610s. And then they ramp up their efforts to eliminate Christianity. And this culminates in roundups and mass executions by the 1620s. Okay? So a very short turnaround. Christianity is effectively a kind of pariah religion. It's no longer an accepted thing to believe in. It becomes socially not only marginal, but persecuted. And this drives Christian communities underground. But then in driving these Christian communities underground, this leads to the development of a unique and independent tradition of worship. Okay? Maybe some of you have heard of this before, right? This is the story of the kakure kirishitan, right? Or sometimes it's translated as crypto-Christian. Okay? And there's one very interesting tradition that I would like to share with you today. And this is called the beginning of heaven and earth. Okay? Or tenchi hajimari no koto. Okay? The date of composition for this text is unknown. It might be sometime in the late 17th or early 18th centuries during the persecuted period. It was probably passed down as an oral legend. And this came to light because a written text version of this was discovered by French Catholic missionaries when missionaries were allowed back into Japan in the 1850s and 60s. So it was rediscovered in 1860. This story came to light in 1865. Now, what is this story? Well, it contains a rough outline of biblical stories to varying degrees of fidelity. It talks about the creation of the world, the fall of humankind, the flood, right? Noah's flood, except there's no Noah in this story. The life of Mary, which is not really a part of the Bible very much, and the life of Jesus and the ministry of Jesus. These elements are mixed in with Buddhist terms and cosmology, as well as hints of Shinto legends and practice. And there are some Japanese social elements like the samurai class that are also featured here. So this has been described by scholars as a very interesting hybrid text. And so today, I want you to read a little bit of this, which is why you have the handout in front of you today. And so since we unfortunately don't have time to get through all of it, I would like for maybe a few of you or maybe a couple of you to read one section together, and then we can come back as a group and sort of share what you found. Okay, so what I want you to think about is I'll assign 2 of you each to one of these paragraphs. I want you to think about what in the Bible it reminds you of. Okay, what do you think is going on here? Okay, so over here with Timo, right? Timo and Amy. We'll read the first one together. I would like for you two to read paragraph 2, number 2, okay? And Yasu and why am I blanking on your? Yeah, Hisashi. Sorry, I know your name. Sorry, I promise. Yasu and Hisashi-san, can you please look at paragraph 3, okay? And then Claire and Pastor Lydia. Oh, well, Achiko-san. Okay, let's just do you 3 together. Please look at. Oh, this is my favorite one. Paragraph 4. Please look at paragraph 4 together, okay? Now let's read the first. I'm going to read the first one too, so follow along with me, okay? So this is the very beginning of this text. In the beginning, Deusu was worshipped as Lord of heaven and earth, and parent of humankind and all creation. Deusu has 200 ranks and 42 forms, and divided the light that was originally one, and made the sun heaven, and 12 other heavens. The names of these heavens are Bembo, or hell, Mambo, Oribeten, Shidai, Godai, Papa, Oroha, Constanchi, Hora, Koroteru, and 100,000 Paraiso and Gokuraku. Deus then created the sun, the moon, the stars, and called into being tens of thousands of anjo just by thinking of them. One of them, Jusuheru, the head of the 7 anjo, has 100 ranks and 32 forms. Deusu is the one who made all things, earth, water, fire, wind, salt, oil, and put in his own flesh and bones. Without pause, Deusu worked on the Shikuda, Terusha, Quarta, Quinta, Sesta, and Sabata. Then on the 7th day, Deus blew breath into this being and named him Domegos no Adang. I love that name. Domegos no Adang, who possessed 33 forms. So this is the usual number of forms for a human being. For this reason, the 7th day of one cycle is observed as a feast day. Deus then made a woman and called her Domegos no Ewa, had the man and woman marry, and gave them the realm called Koroteru. There they bore a son and daughter, Chikoro and Tangho, and went every day to Paraiso to worship Deus. I love that their kids are Chikoro and Tangho. It's like, I just love that detail because it seems so random. Okay, so this is obviously a reference to the creation story, right? But there is a lot of interesting additions. The whole idea of forms, maybe someone here, are any of you more familiar with Japanese Buddhism? Or its doctrine and its practices? I'm not very familiar, unfortunately, something I'm understudied in. So I don't know about this very much, but apparently this idea of ranks and forms comes from Buddhist cosmology. I don't know the details, unfortunately, but I can look into it if you're interested. So I highlighted some of the loan words that are interesting. So bembo is a really funny sounding word, but this is the word for hell. What word do you think it comes from? Bembo in Japanese. There's a sound change that might not be intuitive to you. So this comes from the word limbo, okay? Yeah, I'm in limbo, right? Yeah. So limbo is kind of an older term, right? Referring to hell, right? Paraiso is probably very obvious, right? Paraiso is paradise. It actually preserves the Portuguese quite well. Anjo. It also preserves Portuguese well. What is this word? There are tens of thousands of them. Angels. Yeah. Anjo is an angel. Yeah. And what's going on here? Shikuda, terusha, quarta, quinta, sexta, and sabata. What are the days of the week? Exactly. Yeah, days of the week. So it comes from segunda, tercia, quarta, quinta, sexta, and sabata. Right. Also pretty close to the Portuguese still, actually. Yeah. Okay. And interesting questions like what they have days of the week in Japanese. What? Oh, hi.
I'm so sorry.
Oh yeah.
We need 2 chairs for
Oh yeah.
board members who are
Absolutely. Oh,
able to
do
stand
you need any help getting it? Okay. Yeah.
If someone could do it. Oh,
Yes. Or you could take this one too. Oh, okay.
Okay, we'll take that.
Yeah,
one.
just take.
Thank
Yeah,
you
just, of course.
so
Yeah.
much.
Maybe I should leave it open. Okay. So now with like the various paragraphs that I've just given you, take a couple of minutes to read it just read through it on your own, and then I'll ask you guys to talk about it with each other. Okay. Your assigned paragraph, yes. I didn't want to call it an assigned paragraph, but yes. Yeah, read through it on your own quickly. So yeah, let's talk about this a little bit. So over here, our first group on paragraph 2. What is happening in paragraph 2, you think?
So it's when
Santa Maria is Mary, right? Yeah.
Is coming home pregnant.
That's
and
right.
she's being scolded for being pregnant.
Pregnant, that's right. Which is that in the Bible?
No,
No, it's not. It's not a biblical story. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe there's an oral tradition. Like there is a lot of oral tradition around Bible stories, like Bible stories, even in like Europe. So like maybe some of those are being transmitted, but like yeah, it's not a biblical story. Yeah.
I think it's kind of lets you be in the situation. It sounds reasonable.
It sounds very reasonable. Yeah, it could very well happen, right? Yeah. That's right. Did you figure out why she wanders into the country of Baron? I would not be able to understand this. Yeah.
Amy was.
Amy, yeah.
Right away.
No, I thought it's a bit different.
You're right, exactly. Baron is the word for Bethlehem, but apparently this is quite close to Portuguese for Bethlehem. Does anyone know Portuguese here? Okay. What I read was that in Portuguese, Bethlehem is shortened to Barum. And so it's actually quite close, it's quite faithful to that transmission. Yeah. So
it's again quite interesting that they tried to depict the tough circumstances, but they were writing about heavy snow that had become
right. Snow in Bethlehem, right? Yeah. There's some localization happening, maybe, yeah. And so they're among the cows and horses. So she actually enters a stable, which is interesting, right? This is the whole idea of giving birth in a manger. And then among the cows and the she crouched down and sheltered herself. The stable from noon till midnight she observed zishing. So the commentary that I read on this says that it's also from Portuguese. It almost sounds like a Buddhist practice of some sort. But zishin apparently is like some bastardization of jejum, which I don't know if I believe that. But jejum is like fasting in Portuguese. So in context it does make sense. But the sound change there is a little surprising to me. But then, at midnight she gave birth. This was the birth of the Holy One. So this is the nativity, right? This is how the What? Joseph is not relevant, apparently. If you look into if you read Endo Shusaku or these people who are really fascinated by the Kirishitan period, right? They'll know how much Mary is super important in this tradition. Mary is always important to Catholics around the world, but for the Kirishitan, Mary is very, very revered, and so maybe Joseph just kind of got lost because of how important Mary is. Yeah. So you're right though, Claire. Yeah, Joseph doesn't really feature. So number 3, so Yasu and Hisashi. What did you find? What are your observations?
Well, I had no idea about
Yeah, sure.
these things at first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Later, yeah.
Yeah.
Unless I
But this, the text, it's like something related to the story of the three kings. In
That's
the
right.
Gospel of the
That's right. Yeah. It's the story of the kings.
I still have
Yeah.
trouble with the names of the kings.
Yeah, the names of the kings. Yeah, you have Menteo of Turkey, Gasparo from Mexico, Baltazar from France. Yeah, it's very in some ways it's very interesting choice of names plus countries. But yes, as I mentioned, I think these names are from Melchior, Caspar, and Balthazar as like the traditional three wise men who came to visit Jesus with their gifts. But then, yeah, but so I gave you just a very small excerpt. This is in the context, this actually preserves the gospel narrative quite well. It's the whole story about the kings coming to Herod, and then there's that whole interaction of Herod saying, "Oh, like I will go pay my respects, and you don't need to go." And so they go anyway, and then they see a guiding star that leads them to like the child Jesus, right? So that's what's going on there, yeah. And because they have a shining star, so they arrived in Baron. That kind of tells you that it's from the gospel story, right? As Yasuyu mentioned. That's great. So number 4 is probably my favorite one. So the three of you here, what did you think of? What did you make of this? The sovereign of Baron, King Yorotetsu. Sorry, I love that. I love there's some random Japanese king named Yorotetsu in Baron, but
She gets correct.
yes,
By me pronouncing this, she gets her king to it.
Herod. Oh, it's okay. So you were able to glean Herod from Yorotetsu. Yeah. Yeah,
I
but
asked her to say it. I'm like,
Herod. Yeah. But the thing is, in modern Japanese, Herod is transliterated Herode, right? Herodeo, right? Which isn't very close to Yorotetsu. But like, when you think about the way that Herod is Latinized, it would probably be like Herodius or Herod. There's like an us ending, right? So then that translates a little bit better to Yorotetsu, I think. Yeah. And he cast 2 chief retainers, Posha and Piroto. He's like 2 goons, which I love. What's going on here, Pastor Lydia?
I mean,
Ponsha and Piroto.
did he split up?
Yeah. I believe that's what it is. It's Pontius Pilate. Yeah, Ponteo Pilato, right? Pontius Pilate becomes Ponshato Piroto, right? Which is really, I love that. I love that's such a fun detail. Yeah, this is such a really great example of reception and sort of this Pontius Pilate taking on his own life in the story. Yeah. Anything else that the three of you observed about this?
I mean, this is more of a. No, go ahead. No. It's okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, of the wise man story.
Right. It's a continuation of the wise man story, yeah.
They're calling Jesus a bratty child.
Bratty child, yeah. Yeah, I love that too, is how they just like, they have to like pan Jesus. Like,
Between your fingers.
yeah, yep.
Make like Ponsha and Piroto feel more like two goons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, like after this, they literally punch these 2 guys. They just go around the countryside or whatever and just like go looking for Jesus. But I love that story. Yeah. So yeah, it's just continuation, biblically speaking, of the wise men story. So if you look at the last one, we didn't have a chance to really see this. This is continuation of Yorotetsu looking for the Holy One. And then, yeah, but this is familiar from the gospel story, right? And then he ends up killing a lot of children, which is broadly speaking faithful to the gospel narrative. But then it names the number of infanticides reached total 44,444. Why do you think this number is not from the Bible? Oh yeah, it is. Why do you think this is the number?
Because 4 is like a number often associated with
Death, like she. Right, exactly. That would be my guess. Yeah, as well. Yeah, I think it's a good guess, Claire. Yeah, but the part I want you to see is this very last part after that. So this is why so when the word of this heinous act reached the Holy One's ears, he thought, thousands of children have lost their lives on my account. This is why, for the sake of the salvation of the world to come, he withdrew into the forest of Zezemaria. And you guess what Zezemaria is? It's that's a very good guess, Achiko-san, but that's not quite the one. It's hard to guess this one. This is Gethsemane. Gethsemane is Gethsemane. I mean Gethsemana, maybe. Gethsemana becomes Maria for some reason. Yeah. I don't know why it's Zeze Maria, but yeah, so this is where Jesus goes, right? In the gospel, Jesus goes to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray before he's crucified. And then in the forest, the Holy One received an oracle from Deus. He receives an oracle from God. And says, thousands of infants lost their lives on your account. I fear they may now forfeit the pleasure of Paraiso. For their sake in the next world, you must be tortured and trodden upon, suffer, and give up your body. The Holy One then suddenly fell to the ground, and beads of sweat and blood poured down from him. All right? There is actually a very explicit theology here that would not be accepted in Orthodox Christianity today. Right? It's the idea that Jesus has to atone not only for all humankind, but for himself as well, which is a very, right? This should strike you as a bit alien, yeah. But there's an attempt here to try to remember or understand why Jesus died in the first place. And it's not about the Pharisees or whatever. There is actually a disputation with Buddhists in this story, but they're kind of the stand-in for the Pharisees, which is very interesting as well. But this is, but the reason for that he needs to die is quite, it's because all these other innocents had to die not on his behalf even, they died as an accident from this king trying to find him. Right? If you think about, are all of you familiar with Silence, Endo Shusaku's Chimoku, Silence? Do you kind of remember this rhetoric at all from that novel? Because when sort of the lords, right, of the Nagasaki area are torturing like the Christians, like one of the things that he tells the Jesuit priests is, all of these people are dying because of you, right? And if you would just in word only, just recant your faith, they wouldn't have to die. That's the way that he kind of guilt trips the Jesuit priest, right? To me, it sounds very similar to that rhetoric. So it makes me wonder if that was part of the internalized sort of narrative of at least some of the Kirishitan population. But yeah, that's another thing to wonder. So anyways, I want to end today's session with a few observations. Any other comments about this that you would like to note?
Do we know how many people were part of that movement?
Yeah, of this community?
Yes.
That's very hard to
Small
guess.
or big?
Probably quite small, maybe like upwards of tens of thousands. There's not a very good, which sounds maybe like more than you expected. Yeah, I think but that might be inflated. It's hard to say because the French Catholic missionaries, when they discovered the hidden Christians, their guess was that there were about 30,000 of them. But some scholars have said that number sounds inflated. So we don't really know. And also, this story wasn't inherited by all of the hidden Christians in Japan. It was specific to a couple of regions. I think the Goto Islands and どこだっけ? That area outside of Nagasaki. Sorry, I'm blanking on the region name, but no, it was Kyushu. It is Kyushu. Well, it's mostly Kyushu, but like there's a region where there are traditional crypto Christian communities right outside of west of Nagasaki. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like where Kurosaki and some of these other places are. But anyways, it's these two areas specifically that seem to have inherited this text. Yeah. So hidden Christians in other regions apparently didn't have this. Yeah. So it's a pretty small number of communities that have inherited this text. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
So this story, well, at the beginning you said that it's not really translation, but translation of what? Translation of Bible? This
Yeah.
Bible,
It's loosely based on the Bible, right? Yeah.
totally different from the Bible.
Of course, yeah. And well, this is because the first text that I showed you, that was translated from the Bible, because that was printed when Christianity was still legal in Japan. But then this is from the period of persecution. So this is when there are no missionaries coming into Japan. There are no seminaries in Japan. There's no form of education except for secret transmission. And so that's why most people think this was oral storytelling in the beginning. We don't know exactly how it functioned. By the late 19th century, it seems like the Christians who were inheriting the story were told to revere it. So they wrote it down, and then when you read it, you have to put it above your head, which is a sign of reverence. Which seems to say that it almost functioned as a kind of sacred text by that time. But because of the language is quite casual. I know we're reading this in English translation, but the language is quite casual. So some people are suspecting that maybe it was more entertainment in the very beginning that then eventually became a more became sacralized, is the language used. It became sacred eventually. So yes, this was actually, so it's not explicitly based on the Bible, but it's based on what kakure kirishitan, what they remembered about the stories that they learned. Yeah. And so that's why, to me, it's actually surprising how much of the Bible they actually remember. Even though it omits most of the Bible. There's even a flood story. There's kind of a Noah's flood with another really random sounding name that's not Noah. But yeah. So and especially when it comes to Jesus, Mary, and creation, there's actually a fairly strong memory, which I thought was really surprising. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's all the time we have today. I wanted to make a few concluding observations. So the Kirishitan period never produced a Christian text or a Christian discourse that had wide-ranging influence within the rest of Japan. But the kakure kirishitan themselves did resurface back into the public consciousness in the Meiji period, right? As I mentioned, they were rediscovered in 1865 by French missionaries. And this captured the imagination of a lot of Westerners. Diplomats like Ernest Sato, if you've heard that name before, he was an early British diplomat to Japan. He was very fascinated by the hidden Christians. And this was also very interesting to Catholic and Protestant missionaries. Writers from the late Meiji period onward especially began to take up the kakure kirishitan as a subject of interest in their own writings. Endo Shusaku is the most famous and most prolific in this regard, but also people like Akutagawa were also interested in kakure kirishitan. They wrote short stories about them. And so one thing to know from our text today is how words are remembered. So words with liturgical significance, if you can sort of remember, these tend to be remembered even if they're completely alien to the people. So konshiri-san no orasho is the term, that's the term for the prayer of contrition, which is a very important prayer to the hidden Christians, because in the absence of the priest, that's how you get absolution. That's how you get forgiven for your sins, is to say that prayer. Or the days of the week, we saw that was preserved in Portuguese, even though like they could have easily just made it Japanese, right? But these are preserved because they have some sort of liturgical significance. Even though it's very likely that nobody remembered what the words mean anymore. And so this story functions largely to give back stories to these words. If you notice, like a lot of the ends of the excerpts I gave you says this is how this prayer came about. These are there's a technical term for this in scholarship. It's called etiology. Right? So there's an etiologizing of the practices and the prayers of the hidden Christians that are kind of built into the story, this is interesting. If you're interested, you can ask me about it. But this is part of the theory of how the Bible came to be as well, in some level. So that's another sort of ethnographically interesting point. And so at the same time, we also see how these words rely heavily on Buddhism. Even if the composer of the text and its listeners didn't understand Buddhist doctrine very well, the story in its unique language, they kind of rely on Buddhist concepts to give it meaning, right? You think about the creation story, there's all this talking about forms and whatnot. And sometimes, in some sense, I think this kind of reliance on Buddhism can be parasitic. And what I mean by that is that this story needs something to refute or to subsume. So you didn't really read this, I don't think, in any of today's excerpts, but there's a lot of equivalence drawn between Buddha and God and Deusu in this story. There's a scene where you remember the gospel scene where Jesus is in the Gospel of Luke, I think. He goes to the temple, and then Mary and Joseph, they realize that he's not with them, and they go back to Jerusalem to go look for him. That scene is preserved in this story, but in that scene, Jesus gives a sermon where he talks about how like Buddha and Deusu are one or something. So there's kind of the equivalence drawn between Buddhism and this sort of Christian faith. But also, it needs, but there's also a contention, because later on, but after that, it's kind of this disputation between Jesus and this Buddhist teacher, and where ultimately they settle a score of which is the better teaching by comparing the weight of their texts. So the Buddhist teacher has an Isaikyo, right, the collection of sutras, Buddhist sutras, and then Jesus has this one book. And then they compare the weights of them, and the one book is heavier. Which is interesting, right? So anyways, I think one thing to know is how this also seems to preserve some memory of the interaction between Christianity and Buddhism. There's always this sort of push-pull kind of relationship between the two, because when Xavier comes to Japan, he relies on Buddhist terminology to try to communicate what Christianity is to Japanese people. It's very famously, the first word he used for God was Dainichi, right? As in Dainichi Nyorai, right? And this was, after a while, someone pointed out to him that this was probably not a good idea. So then eventually the Jesuits adopted Deus, right? They just transliterate God in Latin into Japanese. But they have to rely on, kind of what Japanese people already know about Buddhism to make Christianity understandable to them. Yeah. And but at the same time, there's a lot of pretty bitter disputation between the Jesuits and Buddhist monks. And this seems to be at least partially remembered in this story as well. So, we're 1 minute beyond time, but thank you for participating today. And I know we didn't get to the Meiji period at all. I promise next week we will talk more about the modern mission movement and then the Bible translation that happens then. Next week we're going to talk about the Bible as world history, which is and again I'm going to go a little bit into the Edo period, but I promise I'll get into Meiji as well. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you.